Welcome. It has just gone 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday the 25th of November, and you are watching episode 113 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight of the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, bankrupting our nation for naught, is my guest, New South Wales Member of Legislative Council, John Ruddock. John was elected to the New South Wales Legislative Council in 2023. His maiden speech to Parliament was reported internationally when it was banned from YouTube after John questioned Australia's draconian response to COVID-19. Never before in Australian history has a politician's maiden speech from Parliament been banned. Prior to Parliament, John owned a mortgage broking business based in Sydney's North Shore. John is an avid reader, a student of history, and often contributes to Australia Spectator and Sky News Australia. In 2018, he wrote a book titled The Real Liberal Party, Make the Liberal Party Great Again, but joined the then Liberal Democrats, now the Libertarian Party, during the Liberals Party's overreaction to COVID. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon, Bill. Thanks very much for having me.
It's great to have you here. Just before we get onto the subject of renewables and climate change and that, I'd just like a bit of a brief history on your upbringing, how you got to where you were, how you transitioned from the Liberal Party to the Liberal Democrats, now Libertarian Party, after this weekend, which was basically forced on you by the AEC's legislation probably a year or 2 years ago.
Well, look, I was born in 1970. I grew up in regional New South Wales in Tamworth, and every night growing up in the 1980s, my dad would tell me how evil communism was. And then in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, before our eyes, communism collapses all around the world. And the people that were living in communism were so happy to be part of the democratic, free enterprise West. And I thought, look, well, this is what works. It's democracy and free enterprise is what's good for human beings. And, you know, the communists killed about 100 million people in the 20th century. So I came to Sydney to actually worked on an outback farm for a couple of years. And then I thought, look, I should go to university and study history because I was, spending a lot of time in the outback when I wasn't working, reading history books. So I went to university in Sydney and I promptly joined the Liberal Party. Now, even back then, 30 years ago, Bill, I was disappointed with the Liberal Party. I thought that they lacked fight for principles, and the party was really dominated by people who just wanted to be in Parliament because they were too ugly for show business. And so, despite being disappointed with the Liberal Party, I spent a couple of decades trying to bring about reform of the Liberal Party. And I thought, look, we'll end up with better quality candidates if the party is democratic in how they select candidates. So in your fabulous state of Queensland, when the LNP wants to choose a Senate candidate, I think about sort of 500 people get to vote. But my book was saying all the members of the LNP in Queensland should have a vote, which might be 10,000, 20,000 people. If you got that many people voting, they'll vote on merit. They'll vote on who's best, and they'll generally vote for right-wingers. Now, so I knew that this project would take a long time to bring about full democratic reform. And then COVID comes along, okay? And so the government, the Morrison government did three things where I thought, look, there is no hope with this party. And that was the COVID police state, which is, paying us all to sit at home for a virus that wasn't that bad. Okay, so that was the first thing. The second thing was the debt. The Liberal Party in the past had been good at managing public finances, but they got the Commonwealth into $1 trillion worth of debt. Now, when silly Kevin Rudd took over, when he left and handed over to Tony Abbott, he handed over a debt of about $260 billion, which wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible. I mean, John Howard had left Kevin Rudd no debt. So Rudd had got the national credit card up to $260 billion. Then after three Liberal prime ministers, it's $1 trillion. Okay, so I thought, okay, well, they've lost contact with their founding principles. And the third one was the complete capitulation on giving in to all the bullying and all the fake science around global boiling. So I just thought, look, we need a fresh start. Now, I had always liked the Libertarian Party, and I very much enjoy being with the Libertarian parties. It's very much what I believe in. And, I think, look, there's about 10 to 15% of this country votes for a minor party on the right. Now, there's quite a few of them. There's One Nation, there's the United Australia Party, there's the Libertarians, there's a few others, Christian parties, students' parties. But I think over the next few years that sort of minor right party is going to consolidate into one party, and I very much hope that is the Libertarian Party.
Yes, we do have a lot of small parties, and there's quite a few more organisations that are yearning to become a party, get registered as a party, but they did make it a little bit more difficult in the federal sphere, getting the initial membership number up to 1,500 from 500. But within the states, Queensland, you still only need that 500 number to be able to get registered and contest state elections. So that's still one more bit of relief for us in Queensland. But one of the things with the smaller parties is it's a little bit hard to get a grip on what their key policies are. And especially if you go to some parties, they don't really have a core set of policies that you can sort of say, well, this is their welded on policies, and then you can go from there. And even their constitutions are basically doesn't really give you a lot of direction. There might be 3 or 4 points other in regards to what their objectives are, but the rest is just the normal standard administration things that you've got to have in place for membership, dealing with meetings, all those sort of things, which is 95% of their constitution. So I think it's a bit difficult for the ordinary punter to really research a number of parties prior to the elections and getting a bit of a feel for what they're promising. And I don't think just the promising of what people think is really a measure of the character of the party.
Well, look, I think you're largely correct. I think that the Libertarian Party is an exception. We do put out a bold policy platform before an election. So before the federal election, we put out a Federal Freedom Manifesto, and before the state election, we put out a New South Wales Freedom Manifesto. Now, look, we are unashamedly a ideological party. And so we see all public policy through the lens of what is going to make the government smaller. Because we believe that when taxes are low, when regulation is low, when the people are more free, the people will flourish, the people will prosper. So that's how we see everything. So, some right-wing parties, they want a big, powerful state to do right-wing things, and the left-wing parties want a big, powerful state to do left-wing things. We just want to have a much smaller state. We have faith in the people. We think that tax cuts is the most important thing, and deregulation, letting businesses flourish and letting citizens flourish. So we believe in 2 days' time, I'll be moving a motion at the New South Wales Parliament to amend the Constitution of New South Wales to protect free speech, constitutionally protected. So we believe radically in free speech. We believe in civil liberties. So look, a lot of people think of the Libertarian Party as sort of like a more pure version of the Liberal Party. And that is to a large extent correct, but there are important differences. The key difference that I would say is to do with foreign affairs. So the Liberal Party, the Liberal National Party, whenever there's a war on in the world, they want to go get themselves fully invested in a war. We're very skeptical of war. Now, we're not pacifists. We accept that, sometimes we do have to fight. We certainly believe in a strong defense to stop people invading us. But we do believe that in 90% of cases that war can be avoided. Now, if we look at World War I, which was a pointless war and which everybody lost. The history books tell us Germany lost. Well, Britain lost a little thing called the British Empire. The Russian Empire got blown up and got replaced by the communists. The Austro-Hungarian Empire got blown up. The Ottoman Empire got blown up. World War I was a catastrophic war, and I believe in remembering them on Anzac Day and Remembrance Day. But we really remember the young men, and they're in most cases our finest young men, dying for no good reason. And I don't buy the line that they were dying to fight for our freedom. Germany was not going to invade us. Okay, now World War II is different. The Japanese were trying to invade us. Okay, but we can avoid most wars. But politicians think it's macho to go out to war. Okay, and when it's
well, they're not going.
well, that's right. Yes, exactly. Yes, chicken hawks.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We have been dragged into a lot of confrontations and that, with no hope of winning, because you're fighting in a country that's their home ground, and their population is fighting for their country. So that makes it different. And the other thing is, it's no longer fighting an army to army, uniform to uniform. You're fighting basically some elements in the population, and you don't know who's supporting those elements. So it becomes a very tangled mess. And like I say, we've lost a lot of good young people from it for naught gain. And I used to remember on the PBS news during the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars, you used to have the roll call of the American soldiers at the end of the news show. And you just see this roll of people, 19, 23, young women, young men, officers and normal soldiers, just gone, and they're probably the best people of your society. Meanwhile, the people who are drug runners and that are still sitting at home making a profit. So it sort of is a bit heartbreaking.
Well, look, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan. I believe George W. Bush and Tony Blair, I believe they had good intentions. I believe they were very misguided. I believe that they thought that they could bring liberal democracy to Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan has been really cut off from the rest of the world for thousands of years, and they basically just want to be left alone. Now, the Taliban weren't from Afghanistan. They were the Saudis who sort of went and camped in Afghanistan. And well, look, we had to retaliate after 9/11, but they really should have just gone in for 6 weeks, toppled the Taliban government, and then said to them, look, you look after yourselves from here. But Bush and Blair thought, oh, no, let's hang around and, we'll bring about a liberal democracy. Now, I'll tell you, and of course, it all went to hell. Okay, and thousands of people died, millions of people, if you include the Afghanis. And the people that die in war are principally young men. Yes, some young women will die, but it's principally young men who should be going out at the beginning of their lives, starting businesses, starting families, having a productive life, becoming grandparents one day. Okay, but they all got taken out because George Bush and Tony Blair thought we could bring democracy to the Afghans, which was never going to happen. But there is some good news in Afghanistan, which people aren't talking about. They're going really, really well at cricket. Now, cricket is a very civilizing force. Cricket is the greatest sport in the world, if to teach you about sort of, good manners and listening to the umpire. Okay, and I think, in the recent Cricket World Cup, the 50 over Cricket World Cup, Afghanistan came 5th, and I think that's the future. If you want Afghanistan to settle down, don't worry about dropping bombs on them. Encourage cricket.
Yeah, well, if they took it to heart the same way the Indians do,
yes.
Well, there wouldn't be much room for the Taliban and their nonsense, because everyone want to play and participate in cricket and see it and get around the world with the opportunities that it provides. Just moving on from there, if we could just move on to your separation, basically on the from the Liberal Party because of COVID. Do you think some of the mistakes really can be traced back to that national cabinet? I believe in the Constitution and the separation of powers. The states have got their job, the feds got their job, and unfortunately, over the past. Well, World War II was the classic thing. The states surrendered their, temporarily, mind you, income tax to the feds. Yeah. Now, and since then, eventually New South Wales did go and try to get that tax back, income tax back, but the High Court ruled against it because I think they were the basis of the decision. Well, it was too long since you surrendered it, because it wasn't until the 50s. But what a lot of people don't appreciate, things like rationing for some items never ended until the 50s. You know, there were some items that were still coupons. So the real impact of the war hadn't completely dissipated by the time the states started to think about this again. But then, as time goes by, we've sort of had the Commonwealth coerce the states because they collect 95% of the revenue, coerce the states in education, health, and all those things to nationalise or make everything constant across the Commonwealth. We've lost that separation. So do you think that national cabinet was the real downfall of the Morrison government, where they'd come together every week and the states premiers had a chance to beat him around the ears without the rest of his cabinet basically as well?
Look, I think that the national cabinet, which is completely unconstitutional, is a big part of it. Now, what happened was Morrison beat Bill Shorten in May 2019. Now,
Yes.
that's right. Now, Shorten was very much expecting to win after they rolled Malcolm Turnbull. All the experts said he was going to win. But it wasn't like Morrison won. Shorten's big left-wing package got rejected. And then Morrison, surprise, surprise, has won. He didn't have an agenda bill. He didn't campaign. He didn't say, vote for me and I'll do X, Y, and Z. He just had no agenda because, look, he's a very hard worker, Scott Morrison, but he's not a political person. Again, in terms of he's not motivated by ideas and policy. He's not a deep thinker. So he gets the job and then he's sort of got nothing to do. Now, then something comes along called the very bad bushfires we had in 2019, 2020. And I think, I'm a long-term critic of Scott Morrison, but it was very unfair, the public criticism of Morrison over the bushfires. Bushfires are a very natural part of the Australian landscape. And, you know, they happen. Once every 10 years or so, we have a very, very bad bushfire. You know what, Bill? It's going to keep happening. And so they blamed it all on Morrison, and the public fell for it. And I said, oh, it's all Morrison's fault. Oh, he doesn't do enough to stop global boiling. Okay, it's all garbage. But then, when he was really down in the polls, COVID comes along. And Morrison thought, wow, this is going to be my saviour. This is going to get me out of this ditch. So he thought it was great. And he pretended he was Winston Churchill, at the helm, facing the big conflict. And so Morrison sort of like went overboard. He said, oh, yeah, this is so serious.
War cabinet.
Yeah, well, war cabinet, exactly. So he brings in the national cabinet, which was complete garbage, because one of the great things of the Federation was meant to be that the states can have different policies and learn from one another. So if a state makes a mistake, the other states can learn. And if the states do something, have a very smart policy, the other states can learn. That's what Federation was meant to be about. But they nationalised it. Like everything's been nationalised in this country. We barely have any states. I love your little image there, Bill, about far north, northern, Mackay and central. Yes, we should have a lot more states in this country. I think New Zealand was going to join the Federation and then pulled out at the last moment. I don't think New Zealand regrets that.
No.
It can be its own independent little dynamic country. If New Zealand had been part of the Federation, it'd be asleep today like Tasmania is, and like South Australia is pretty quiet. Okay, because Canberra, a little town in New South Wales, sort of runs everything. Okay, but we've got a mutual defence pact with New Zealand. We've got free immigration, so we're very friendly. And I think that's something we very much need to get back to states' rights, and we need to have a lot more states. And the Liberal Party the National Party used to very much believe in states' rights until John Howard came along, and then Tony Abbott was worse. They sort of gave up on states' rights. They said, oh no, centralisation is everything. They said, Canberra should run the healthcare policy. Canberra should run the schools. Okay, well, this is absolutely not a conservative right-wing position at all. This is a left-wing position. But the two great right-wing leaders, so-called in our time, said, oh, no, let's not worry about states' rights. So So no, look. So we COVID, we knew straight away, within a couple of weeks, we knew in March 2020 that while COVID was a bad flu, it was not Ebola, and we knew that because the first country outside of China to hit was Italy. Now we saw the statistics immediately. It was killing people over the age of 80 who had other sicknesses, and it was killing them quickly. So what we should have done is, if we were going to have any lockdowns or anything, we should have targeted it at people that were vulnerable. But no. They wanted to create a sense of crisis. And so they locked us all in our homes. They paid us money to keep our businesses shut down, paid us to stay at home. Oh, surprise, surprise. We've thrown around $500 million and we've got inflation. Well, they did it all around the Western world. So no, look, it was all crazy. Then of course, they say you can't leave your home until you take 2 vaccines. Okay. These were rushed vaccines. Vaccines, are very powerful little things. They can be very, very good after many, many years of trialing them to see whether there's unexpected negative side effects. We didn't wait for that. And so this thing came out. So it was all diabolical, and it all happened under Liberal Party government.
I think one of the big things too is, like you say, Italy was the first one hit. And the reason they were hit is because the Chinese who went home over the Christmas break, because places like Milan, the Chinese basically own Milan in regards to the leather goods and fashion industry, and because of the boats, belts and road type agreements, they're allowed to have their own workers in their country, which is sometimes I'll say a lot. It annoys the local population, but they came back in droves after that Christmas break with the flu, with the Wuhan flu, and basically Milan got devastated. But like I say, we did get a information in regards to the mortality rates and the morbidity, and that was freely available. It was on the web for maybe a month or so, and then all of a sudden, all that stuff disappeared. That sort of gave you an indication, well, this is not going to affect 95% of the population. And then if you said anything counter, you suddenly started to have a bit of trouble. So I think that was another draconian sort of system that came in, is the media control.
Look, the worst part, that's all entirely correct, Bill. The worst part about COVID is that 85% Australians went along with it. They didn't mind being treated like farm animals by the big government. And that's the most alarming part. If this had happened in the 1970s or the 1980s, we would have had people out on the streets in a much bigger way than we did, 10 times the amount of people. And there would have been resignations from the cabinet. If this had happened under Malcolm Fraser or Bob Hawke, there would have been ministers who said, I am not going to be part of locking people up at home for something that's not that serious. And so now, after they realised that the government must have been licking their lips, thinking, "Wow, we can push the people around like sheep," and there's no blowback, just a little bit, but there's not much blowback. Now I think they thought, oh well, look, we've got all this power now. Let's go hard on the main meal. COVID was the entree. Global boiling is the main meal.
But also, were you surprised how Australians conform? And I've had this issue within my family, because I live in Queensland, some live in Victoria, some live in Western Australia, the Hermit Kingdom of Western Australia, and their views to an instance is that McGowan saved them and all this sort of garbage and that, so it causes a little bit of angst. But were you surprised how readily Australians accept it? I suppose the fact that you could sit home and get twice the dole type thing was some incentive for a lot of people who just like being looked after. But do you think there's also Australians over the last, say, 2 decades or a little bit longer have become a lot more dependent on government, or the expectation is that government is going to provide for them?
Well, I think what's happened is we're a very, very wealthy nation. Now, I know people never say that, but the truth is, this is why people want to jump on little boats to come and live here. compared to all other societies in the past and almost every other country on earth today, we are a rich country. The poor people in Australia have their problem is not a lack of food, it's obesity. Okay, so that's how wealthy we are. Now, because we've become so wealthy and comfortable and relaxed, and people go on holidays and got a million devices in their home, life's very comfortable. And because we haven't had struggle for a long time, now that's a good thing. We want prosperity. But the downside with having such extended prosperity for so long, I mean, we haven't had a recession in this country, officially since for 30 years. I think it just makes us weak. It makes us soft. And that's what happened. Now, in relation to Western Australia, look, that was a unique situation because Perth is the most isolated major city on the planet. Okay, it's a hell of a long way until you get to another major city, surrounded by ocean and desert. Look, the people in Western Australia did vote in the 1930s to leave the Commonwealth. They do have a hostility to the rest of this country, and I think it's very well-grounded hostility. I think they are overtaxed. I think Western Australia should be unleashed from Canberra's clutches. It can become a much more dynamic and prosperous state. But I think that when COVID came along and the Premier said, oh, well, let's cut ourselves off from the eastern states, I think the average Western Australia said, well, this is fantastic. We've always wanted to do that. Thank you, COVID.
Well, yes, they voted for it, and I think it was almost more than 60% of West Australia voted for to secede from Australia in 1933. But for some reason, that went to the final arbitration, went to the British courts and that, and it was knocked back because I think the interpretation for secession is that the whole country should vote on it rather than just the state that wants to secede. Well, that's completely illogical, and that's not the situation when a part of a state wants to become a separate state. It's only the people in that area that votes on it. So yes, I do remember my father telling me about the great effort to leave Australia when I was a young lad in the 1960s, because I was born in West Australia. So it is a strange situation with West Australia, and especially when you think they've got an axe to grind, because they've been basically holding up Australia financially with iron ore for some time, and their GST return got well down to nearly 37%. It's 37 cents in the dollar. So they're a little bit irate during the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s as well.
Well, they should be irate. And I think federation was a mistake, Bill. Now, not many people have said that since 1901. I think it was a mistake. I think New Zealand made the right decision. So in the early 1890s, the people across this continent had come to the view, there was 7 British colonies, if we include our friends in New Zealand. And we'd come to the view in the early 1890s that we were sufficiently mature to become independent of Britain. And Britain, having learnt their lesson in the American Revolution and then the Canadian independence in the 1860s, the British said to the colonies here in Australia, said, look, if you want to be independent, we'll be supportive of that. We'll be friendly, and that's great. And they were helpful. So it was very much our decision. So, but people think of federation as just a one-step process, independence from Britain, but in fact it was a 2-step process. Yes, there was the first step of independence from Britain, but then what would the post-independence structure look like? Now, option 1 was that we become a big federated Commonwealth. Option 2 is that we all remain very friendly and happy and have very good relations with each other, but we become our own nations. Now, New Zealand was part of the federation discussions up until 1897, and then New Zealand decided to say, well, we wish you all the best, Australians, but we're going to have our own little country. And I don't think anybody in New Zealand regrets that. New Zealand is a dynamic little, happy little country with its own identity, and they're all happy. And I think that we should have, in 1901, we should have all done what New Zealand did. Now, just like with New Zealand Day, we can have a free people movement, we can have free trade, and we can have a mutual defence pact. But I think if that happened, this continent would be a lot stronger, a lot more wealthier, and a lot more confident. And I think that the biggest winner out of that would be Western Australia. I think Western Australia would be unleashed. Now, at the moment, what's happening is a little town in New South Wales called Canberra dictates policy to all the states. It says what the minimum wage has to be, says what your industrial relations has to be, says what your company tax has got to be, your income tax. It's all the same all across the country, whether you're in Broome or Burnie or, Bundaberg. It's all the same, all run from one little sort of town called Canberra. My party, the Libertarian Party, very much believes in states' rights and localism. We think the government is best when it's close to the people. And I think Queensland would burn. And Queensland might split up into 4 states itself. Well, that would, that'd be fine. I think that, look, let's say Amazon, a big international global company, wants to invest $5 billion in Australia. Now, at the moment, under the current rules, it's 90% chance a big $5 billion investment like that, which is going to employ a ton of people and be good for the economy in general, they're either going to go to Sydney or Melbourne. That's where the executives want to live, part of a big international city. But if we were 6 independent nations, Tasmania could say to Amazon, hey, look, come and invest here in Launceston, no company tax for 10 years. Okay? And Amazon would say, well, that's a great deal. So we're going to put our $5 billion into Tasmania. And we could have competition amongst the countries, states/countries. So who's going to have the lowest tax rates? Who's going to have the lowest regulation? What would happen is, with time, we'd become a much more creative, prosperous nation if we were 6 nations.
I think also, just if we went back to the true words of the Constitution, would even be an improvement on what we've got. But one of the things is, you're talking very strongly on freedom of speech. It's interesting why Australia's Constitution never had that incorporated, considering the forefathers had the benefit of looking at a number of constitutions worldwide, and then also looking at the amendments that came through later. So it wasn't just the original constitutions of any country that was out there previously, but it was also the amendments. And we've seen, especially in the United States, their amendments to the Constitution, the First Amendment for free speech. It seems strange that we didn't incorporate free speech in the original Constitution. Now, you're talking about putting it into the state constitution of New South Wales. What would that look like? Because I've looked at the different copies of the Queensland Constitution, the New South Wales Constitution, and to put it mildly, they're a bit iffy documents. They sort of talk about paying in the judiciary and things like that, rather than how the judiciary works or how much they're going to pay someone. Exactly whereabouts do you think it would slot in as an amendment like 1A, or would it go to the bottom of the page, or how do you expect it to be slotted in if you're successful?
Well, it'd be a new section. So we've drafted it up with the help of the Parliamentary Legal Counsel's Office. So it'll all be public in about by the time this show goes to air, we should have delivered a speech in Parliament, and we spell out what part of the Constitution it goes into. Look, your question about why doesn't the Australian Constitution protect free speech? It's a very good one, Bill, and there's no good reason. Because we did have the American Constitution, now we have various French constitutions, they all guaranteed free speech. And look, it's disappointing. I basically blame Alfred Deakin. He's the mastermind that put Federation together, because he was an egomaniac, a megalomaniac. He didn't want to just be the Prime Minister of Victoria, which he could have easily have been. He wanted to be the Prime Minister of a much bigger country, because he was just a power-crazy politician. And he didn't really trust the people. He thought the state is all supreme and the state should boss the people around. That was Alfred Deakin's mindset. I would like to do more research on the constitutional debates at the Constitutional Convention they had in 1897, 1898 about was this issue actually, did this issue come up? So it is a disappointment, but look, hopefully we can change it, because free speech is under attack all across the Western world, and in particular the English speaking world. They're wanting to bring these things, the ACMA disinformation, misinformation bill. Canada, New Zealand, the US and the UK are all trying to do the same thing at the same time. Now, thanks to the First Amendment in the United States, the US Supreme Court has struck down Joe Biden's efforts to regulate social media. But this is what they're trying to do. And if there's this concerted effort around the world to bring in laws to suppress free speech, there must be something, Bill, that they're trying to suppress. And what could that be?
Well, wouldn't be the results of COVID or
Global boiling.
global warming.
They want to stop there being a debate about the scientific merit of global boiling. That's their biggest thing in the world. All the major parties have fallen for it, and the science is so settled on global boiling that it can't even have a debate.
Yeah, so, just before we moved on that, because talking about Alfred Deakin just made me think of Samuel Griffiths. Now, there is a hero, and it has its own society in Australia, the Samuel Griffiths Society, and a lot of people will sort of look at him as some sort of leader. But I've looked into some of the history of and I think he was one of the problems with Queensland not breaking into a number of colonies, into at least 3 colonies before Federation. So he would have went to Federation with the 2 extra states, Central and North Queensland. And reading in between the lines, it seems what he was trying to do, because he was really trying to keep Queensland out of Federation behind the scenes, with the hope that it became a separate country with 3 states. And that's just my interpretation of some of the documentation that I've seen. But it's interesting, the gameplay in regards to our founding fathers, and really the scope of the people involved, from John Forrest right across to the people in the eastern states. But if we could just move on now to global boiling, can you tell me where you came away from the general narrative of what started off as catastrophic anthropogenic global warming in the first place back in the 90s under Mr. Hansen, and then it became climate change, and now it's climate destruction, now climate boiling. So were you sort of listening to that in the first instance, or never accepted in the first instance, and when did you separate it, if you would at least sort of considered it?
Well, I've always been very interested in US presidential politics, and I've also always been fascinated by the Democrats' candidate in the year 2000, Al Gore. And he's a very skilled politician, and he's a very deceptive human being, but he's brilliant. He's brilliant at being bad. And there's 5 biographies of Gore. I've read them all twice, Bill. And in the 1980s, Al Gore was a morals crusader. He wasn't talking about global boiling at all. He was like, I don't know, do you know when I say Fred Nile, does that name ring a bell?
Yeah.
Big Christian morals crusader, getting lewd music out off the shelves and stuff. That's what Al Gore was originally famous for. Everyone's forgotten about it now. There's a little bit of a reference to it in Wikipedia because his mates run Wikipedia. But the truth is, this went on for about 4 or 5 years. He was trying to campaign against satanic music, and a lot of it was talking about
Ozzy Osbourne.
He was talking about backward masking, nonsense. Anyway, but he was just desperate to become president, and then he runs for president in 2000. Now, he very narrowly lost. It was a freak result, 537 votes in Florida, and half of America thought that he was robbed. And then he decides to reinvent himself. Now, he had about 1990, he had written a book on global boiling, and that sort of made him famous and got him onto Bill Clinton's vice presidential ticket. Anyway, but then while he was the vice president, he didn't talk about global boiling. It's just something he uses. Now, then he wanted to make this big comeback in 2006. So he comes out with his book, An Inconvenient Truth, wins the Nobel Prize, wins the Academy Award. Okay, he's everywhere. He's pretending like he's Mother Teresa, or he's Gandhi. He's this figure above politics. He's a saint. And I just knew how much of a con man this guy was. So, yeah, I've been very skeptical of it ever since Gore had anything to do with it, because I know the guy is he's a scoundrel. He's a prophet of doom, and he's a Pied Piper. He's tricking people, and he has look what he's done. He's more powerful than a president of the United States. He's the most powerful person this century in the whole world. You go to Zimbabwe, you go to Bulgaria, you go to South Korea, you go to Bolivia. Global boiling is everywhere. They're talking about it. It's this mass delusion. The scientific reality is totally ignoring it. The real world reality, but they are it's the Western world has moved away from organized religion in the last generation, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, but they've embraced global boiling as the new religion. There's an apocalypse, there's a very narrow path to salvation. You've got to cut down your carbon and everything. And then you've got to sacrifice. We're blowing up our very good electricity system to replace it with a very unreliable, very expensive renewables industry, which is causing us problems no end.
I think the most interesting thing about it is the methodology that the global warming people use is their decision just to say the science is settled and there's no debate, and they won't debate people with a different view and have who are quite renowned scientists and got a lot of documentation, got the mathematical skills to show what it is. And let's face it, I don't know of anything in nature that has a runaway effect. I mean, you can talk about nuclear fission and that, but that's not natural. But normally, our earthly environment, our natural environment, most things, if something goes up, there's a force to push it back down, or equal knock-on reaction. So if we get a bigger tropical area where we get more clouds and we got to get suppression and things like that, this notion that we're going to have some sort of runaway effect is counter-scientific in the first instance. But the other thing is just the demonization of carbon dioxide. I mean, you can't even have a conversation with someone and just say, well, all life forms on Earth depend on carbon. We're a carbon-based life form. CO2, it's essential for life. Without photosynthesis, plants die and then we die. And then without its contribution to the greenhouse effect, if there was no greenhouse effect, the world's temperature would be 33 degrees Celsius lower and would just be a big snowball. So it beggars belief that we can't have intelligent conversations.
Bill, if an alien came down to visit us and then reported back to the mothership what's going on down here, they check this out, they would report, and if they just had one sentence to describe life on Earth, they would say, oh, well, on Earth, it is a carbon-based life, which is precisely what you've said. Yes, now the lefties are so sort of deep down against life and progress that they've demonized the thing that gives us life more than anything else, carbon dioxide. And, when people see pollution in the third world, they say, oh, well, we've got to do something about this carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide's invisible. I don't think, look, lots of very good people have forcefully made the scientific account for saying this is junk science. But I think they've switched off this. This is a mental delusion that's infected us. There was a book written in almost 200 years ago by Charles Mackay. It's called Extraordinary Mass Delusions. There's been a ton of them. Human beings are very, very smart little creatures. Look, we split the atom, we put man on the moon, we built the internet. I'm talking to you from Sydney, you're in Cairns. Through technology, humans are smart. But despite being so smart, we're also capable collectively of going mad for a period of time. Now, we always snap out of it, which is the good news. But this is where we're at right now. So we're in a mass delusion. It's particularly affecting the English-speaking countries. And, it's going to come to an end at some point, Bill. It's just a question of, how much damage will be done between now and then.
I think one of the other problems that keeps it going is the indoctrination through our education system, from universities right through down to primary schools now, pushing the barrow. So it starts to get ingrained. It's something that, you might maybe have to re-educate people in the long run in regards to what reality is. But you're saying it has to come to an end somewhere. Do you think it's the renewables is going to put an end to this in regards to the barriers that achieving net zero for renewable is going to suddenly hit a wall? I mean, it seems to be hitting a wall in other countries that are further advanced. But do you think it's going to be in regards to people are going to wise up and look and realise through their hip pocket that this thing is going to cost them an arm and a leg? It's not going to deliver what the politicians say it's going to do. Do you think that's going to be the turning point rather than the scientific argument?
Well, look, if the science was true, we obviously should take whatever steps are necessary to address the problem. We don't want to end life as we know it, which is what they're claiming. Okay, but I just don't. It's not true, and so therefore, the effort is not necessary. It's just this big delusion. After the left wingers in the West lost the Cold War, you would have thought they would have come around and said, "Oh, well, we were wrong about economics. Capitalism is a good thing." But no, they just sort of morphed overnight and saying, "Oh, well, now we need a really big government to boss us all around." Global warming, global boiling. Okay, now. Your question is about, at some point, will the public turn against it because their electricity bills get too high and they just see that it's not working? Look, it's almost like we're the little frog in the boiling water. The average Joe Blow out there sees their electricity prices going up, but they're not blaming it on global boiling. Well, I think a lot are, but not a majority. Now, over the weekend, we heard the terrible news that Chris Bowen has said to the renewable industry, because, we were told by Al Gore 15 years ago, Bill, the renewables are going to be cheaper and cleaner and highly profitable. Oh, that's great. That's great. That's going to happen. Hasn't happened. Okay. They keep needing more taxpayer money. And over the weekend, hardly got any attention. Should have got a lot more than it did. Chris Bowen, the federal energy minister, has come out and says the federal government is going to underwrite all these renewable projects. They can't lose money. Okay. So they are just so intent on just pumping endless billions. I think worldwide there's been about 14 trillion put into this crap, and all ending up in the pockets of spivs, people who are trying to cash in on a fake apocalypse. So look, we've got if they keep throwing so many billions at it in Australia, maybe they will be able to patch together a very expensive electricity system. But it'll fall over. I mean, it can't be sustained. But coal is a magnificent form of energy. It's almost like, I'm not a particularly religious person. It's almost like God has given us on this planet unlimited coal and unlimited oil, almost unlimited. Okay, and it's a magnificent thing. It's the result of, forests and things decomposing 200 million years ago. And in Australia, there's a ton of it, from Victoria to North Queensland, along the eastern coast, and it's a very cheap form of energy, and this is what has powered Australia's success. Now we're wrecking it. When I was growing up, this country used to have 3-4% economic growth every year. Then we'd have a recession every 7 years. Recessions are a good thing. Recessions wake people up. Recessions, maybe people are in the wrong job, and a recession teaches them, you lose your job because there's a recession. They'll find a better job. Maybe people are in the wrong type of business. Maybe people who've got a good business, and a recession comes along, the recession makes them stronger. But we used to have 3-4% economic growth, then a couple of years of recession, then we'd bounce back stronger. Since the GFC, when for some reason all these geniuses decided to just bail out all these reckless banks with taxpayer money, we've been so swamped with debt and high government spending and high taxes that the economy's just been plodding along at 1 or 2%, which is below our population increase. So we've actually been in a technical recession for a very long time. And so part of the reason we've got such a sluggish economy is the energy transition, which is clearly not working.
the other thing that's happening is a lot of people, when it started talking about renewable energies, not a lot of people understood what scope of renewables we would need to replace our roughly 40 gigawatts of baseload coal-fired power stations and gas power stations on the national grid. Now, the sheer number of projects that are on the drawing board of that, goes into the hundreds, just even in Queensland, and that's continuing to grow, and it's starting to affect so many communities. So I'd just like to chuck up a screenshot now.
Oh, yes.
All right. Now, you're going to be part of this on Thursday. It's the
Yes,
Reckless Renewables Rally. I think they had a small one in Brisbane a couple of months back, but I also think they're aiming to have one in Canberra eventually as well. But it's now for every new renewables project that comes up, there's almost within weeks a community group that's sort of there to oppose it or question its effect on the community. Is this something that is sort of also helping make the whole population, and even maybe wake up the media to some degree, of the sheer scale and impact of these renewables?
Well, look, I'm very pleased to see public protests. I hope they do take off all around the country. Now, I am disappointed that for so many Australians, they only want to protest when it's personally impacted them. Okay, but look, we'll take what we can get. People should have been able to see this chaos coming. So look, let's hope this is a Martin Place in Sydney, just at the front of Parliament House. Parliament House will be sitting, and regardless of what's going on in Parliament House, I'll definitely be there. Looking forward to it. I think the great Ian Plum will be there, and a few others. So yeah, look, I mean, it's not affecting people in the wealthy parts of our major cities.
Yeah. Well, it never will. It's only going to affect people in the regions.
It's not affecting the people. It's not affecting many politicians, and it's not affecting many journalists. So therefore, these things are happening. These ugly eyesores, and they're going to be putting these big things over people's very productive farms. So it's look, the Liberal Party, the Liberal National Party, were meant to be our friends they were meant to be rational. They've fallen for it. John Howard fell for it. Tony Abbott fell for it. Now, I'm certain that neither Howard or Abbott believe in it. I think they know that it's junk science. But as Prime Minister, the two of them did a hell of a lot to bring about all this infrastructure. And there's so much money sloshing around in favour of the global warming game. There's a million institutes. Government gives them money. There's all these public servants, and the skeptics are sort of, there's no money on our side of it. There's very little organisation. There's just plain citizens who are speaking out for rationality. So let's say, I am optimistic, Bill. I am optimistic.
But the other thing a lot of people don't realise, that money that's going to subsidise or guarantee a return on the transmission lines, or guarantee a certain rate for the renewables electricity tariff feeds and things like that, that's money that's not available for hospitals, ambulances, education, and it runs in the tens of billions of dollars, and people can see where we're going in regards to, if you take it, there's only one pot of money basically, and the ones we borrow, of course, but the more we throw at that is the less money there's there for other things like wealth creation. None of these things create any wealth. And the other thing that's really scary, if we do get them in, every 20 years we have to replace the whole lot, and the supply chain, all the supply chain is foreign, and even to a degree that supply chain is hostile when you talk about China. So it's sort of leaving us in a situation where we're undermining our energy security plus and also our national security in one hit and making ourselves poorer.
Yes, well, China, carbon dioxide emissions over the last 25 years have been in decline. They never tell us this, but it's true. They've been going down with all this effort that we've put in. Okay, it's having an impact. Okay, but in China, so Australia, has a minuscule amount of the carbon dioxide output. China currently constitutes 32% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, and it's going up 10% a year, 10% a year. But all the global warming gang, Bill, they love China. They say, oh, China's doing everything it can. China's fantastic. Why is that? Because all these spivs are over in China making money, because they get cheap manufacturing. Then they come. So they love China. They don't care the fact that if carbon dioxide really was poisoning the planet, Bill, if it really was this insidious gas which is going to kill us all before too long, all these global warming freaks, they should be protesting out the front of the Chinese embassies. And they should be saying to the Australian government, don't trade with China. Treat them like South Africa in the 1980s. Cut them off, put sanctions on them. They're poisoning us, aren't they? It's going up 32% plus 10% extra a year. Okay, but no, they love China. They love China because it's making them rich.
And the stupid part is it's out there in the public sphere in regards to how many more coal-fired power stations China is building, and also India is ramping up its coal production. I think it's 900 million tonnes at the moment, but they want to head up to 1.5 billion metric tonnes annually. So it's not as though they're concerned about CO2 emissions. So it beggars belief that our politicians so readily fall. There's another interesting concept. You were associated with people in the Liberal Party. How many really actually believe it, and or is it just groupthink?
Well, there's two types of people in the New South Wales Liberal Party, at least. I'm sure it's probably the same all across the country. There's the 80% of good members who've got lots of common sense, people similar to yourself, Bill, interested in politics, because they care about the future. Okay, and they're thoughtful about things, and they've read books, and they take a real interest in it just because they're good patriots. And that's 80% of the membership. Now, then you've got 20%, which are the careerists and the opportunists who just join the Liberal Party or the Labor Party because they want to be in politics. They show business for ugly people. And so these careerists and opportunists, they don't care what the reality is. They don't care what the truth is. They care about what will advance them. And they've made the decision, well, I'm going to pretend I really believe in global boiling, because then the Sydney Morning Herald and the ABC will pat me on the head and I won't be able to get attacked. And if I do something wrong, my friends in the media say, oh, well, he's a moderate Liberal, so let's go soft on him or her. So look, we've been debating this thing, intensely since Al Gore's movie. That was 2006. If you still believe in the science by now, you're not serious about it, because if it's true, you'd seriously look into it. You think, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. We've got to save this, Now, if people really want to look into it, which is what every single human being on this planet should do, they should really investigate the science, because, we've got to love the world, we've got to love the planet, we've got to love the ecology. So, but anybody that does do that, anyone that does objectively look into the science, works out that it's all BS, works out that it's all a scam. And I fear what's happened. I think where most people are at in Australia is this. I think about 1 in 3 are already global boiling skeptics to some extent. Then you've got about another third of Australia who are people who think, well, look, I'm sure that the left is hyping this up, but since there's so much talk and hullabaloo about it, it must be at least half true. There must be some truth to it. And this is the theory of the big lie. The bigger the lie, the more people fall for it. And that's where we're at right now. Well, people have just got to get their heads. No. This is all just made up. The oceans aren't rising. The temperatures aren't rising. Bushfires aren't increasing. Hurricanes aren't increasing. The only thing that's increasing is the bank balances of people who are profiteering off this.
The other thing is those people who push the thing, they're the ones who happily fly around in their private jets, buy beachfronts mansions. So it's sort of the hypocrisy speaks for itself, I think. It's getting towards the hour, so we'll wrap up in a sec because I know you've got to do some more. I can see you champing at the bits. But if I could just show one screen here. Now, this is the current situation that we've got. If we've got take a baseload power station like Stanwell Power Station in Queensland, it produces 1.46 gigawatts of baseload power. It cost about $1.6 billion to build in the 1990s, and it's got a footprint of about 16 square kilometres. Now, to get the equivalent baseload power, you have to build the equivalent of 13 Cooper's Gap wind farms at a cost of $11 billion, and you've got to back it up with 75 Hornsdale battery facilities at a cost of nearly $13 billion. And these ones only have a life of 20 years max, if that, and a new-fired power station can go 60 years. There was one actually in Virginia that went 80 years. So the economics don't sort of hold up, and you wonder why, just on the economics, that people are not balking, or smart people or politicians aren't balking at this.
Well, okay. Well, you've got dodgy investors making $1 squillion out of it. I don't believe the politicians are personally profiting out of it, like in a commercial sense. But these politicians, particularly left-wingers, they love being our saviours. They want there to be a crisis, and then they can solve it for us. And then we can say, oh, thank you, Chris Bowen. Thank you, Anthony Albanese. Thank you, Scott Morrison. So this is they are getting a kick out of it because it makes them feel like they're historic figures saving the world. And you've got the media are fully invested in it because they just love sensationalism. They just love a crisis. Okay, and you've got the investors. So it's the unholy alliance. The investors, the politicians, and the media, and of course academics, get easily tricked by these fads. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at to in late 2023, Bill. But stay tuned. The tide is going to.
Well, I think it would be interesting to talk to you and the other people in the Reckless Renewables rally after the event. I hope that goes well. I'm sure it will. And really, the people in the regions need to get behind these sort of things because they're the ones who are most affected. And another thing I would like to discuss with you sometime on maybe an episode with maybe someone else from the Libertarian Party is what exactly is a libertarian, what does it stand for, and what does it offer voters in the future? If you could give that a little bit of thought, because I think it's an intriguing subject in comparison to the normal politics of a political party, especially our current major parties. But if we could just finish up now, any final words in regards to moving forward, and especially with hoping for the success of your amendment for free speech in the Constitution of New South Wales?
Well, look, thank you for the opportunity, Bill. I have enjoyed having a discussion with you. I enjoy speaking with people who know their Australian history, which you clearly do. Look, I would just like to try and define libertarianism for you in 30 seconds. Look, we believe that the record of history is very clear. When we have a small government, the people are big and the people flourish. They're prosperous, they're happy, they're dynamic, they're creative. And when we start taxing them too much and regulating them too much, and having all these political messiahs out there trying to run our lives for us, things get stunted. So we believe in massive tax cuts. We believe in returning things to the private sector that the private sector can do better than the government, which is most things, if not all things. So our favorite country, the favorite libertarian country is Switzerland. Switzerland's got a population of about 8 million, similar to New South Wales. It's got about 27 states. So they very much devolve power down. Switzerland's got very low taxation rates, very low regulation, booming economy, very high life expectancy, very low crime rates. You never hear about there being some big scandal in Switzerland, okay? The Swiss are very happy people. They don't go to war, okay? If people want to have a firearm in their house, They're allowed to. They've got the lowest homicide murders in the world. Okay, so if you want to know what libertarianism is, Switzerland is a good place to start. We believe, you look at a little place like Singapore. Now, that's not libertarian because, the cops are pretty authoritarian when it comes to dropping litter and stuff. But economically, Singapore is very libertarian and it's booming. Okay, and Hong Kong used to boom before the bloody communists came in and wrecked it up. But because they've only got about 10% tax, 10% tax bill. If everyone's just paying 10% tax, means they're going to have a lot more control over their lives because they've got control of their money.
Well, that's what we should look forward to. Look, again, I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I do hope we can have another conversation sometime in the future. It's been enlightening, but like I say, there's still a long way for the ordinary person and people like yourself to go to have some ability to put a dent in these major parties. And unfortunately, it seems like your former party, the Liberal Party, doesn't seem to learn anything, because it just made Dave Sharma, appointed him the replacement senator for Maurice Payne, I think. So it's more of the same from the Liberal Party.
Well, all around Australia, they keep pre-selecting careerists and opportunists. We need some more true believers. I'm not sure where Jared Reddick's up to from your state, but he's terrific. And I know he lost his pre-selection, but he's challenging it. I don't know where it's up to, but I mean, if they get rid of Reddick, it would be sad because he's a great guy. But this is what they're doing all the time, all around Australia. So they're hollowing themselves out.
Well, hopefully that people like Ruddock can find themselves a new home if the Liberal Party doesn't appreciate them.
Absolutely. They're all very welcome at the Libertarian Party.
Okay, John, look, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. If you could just stay on the line for a second, I'll just introduce next week's topic. Sure. And thank you. Thanks again, John. If you enjoyed today's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join me again next week, and I'll be talking to Bill Stinson and the aftermath of the reckless new renewables rally held in Sydney's Martin Place on Thursday, the 30th November. So please join me then. Thank you.